The most interesting computer released this year is a desktop, and it's made by Microsoft. Meet the Surface Studio, the Windows maker's bigger and bolder follow-up to its hybrid Surface laptops. It looks a lot like an iMac up close, as well as plenty of other PC all-in-ones, but give the Surface Studio's huge screen a bit of a nudge, and it's easy to see how it's different from everything else. The display bends all the way down to a 20-degree angle, which makes it ideal for serious drawing sessions with the Surface Pen. But let's start from the top. This is a gorgeous computer. The focus is on its 28-inch screen, outputting an insanely dense resolution of 4500 by 3000 pixels. That's 63% more than what's in a 4K screen. The display is 12.5mm thin, so it practically disappears when you view it from the side. It's so sharp and vibrant that it makes everything, even boring office documents, look incredible. You can also switch between sRGB and wider gamut P3 color standards on the fly, which could be very useful for artists. All of the hardware is contained in the studio's nondescript aluminum base. The only wire that comes out of the back is a single power cord. It sports 4 USB 3.0 ports, a mini DisplayPort connection, an SD card reader, and a headphone jack on the rear. While that makes the design look clean, I would have appreciated the headphone jack and some ports on the side. The base and screen are joined together by chrome hinges, which houses all of the necessary wiring to connect the two, as well as an elaborate 80-spring system to let you adjust the screen. And really, that's where the Surface Studio's magic lies. Tilting the screen requires very little effort, though you have to make sure there's nothing directly below it. Microsoft built on its experience with the Surface and Surface Book hinges to make the Studio's mechanism possible, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It also makes it clear this isn't a computer meant for everyone. It's for people who need to get real work done and can afford to spend big bucks. Under the hood, the $3,000 Surface Studio starts with a 6th Gen Core i5 processor, 8GB of RAM, a 64GB SSD for the OS, and 1TB of internal storage. There's also an NVIDIA GTX 965M GPU with 2GB of memory. I tested the top-of-the-line model, which retails for $4,200. It includes a Core i7 CPU, 32GB of RAM, a 128GB SSD, 2TB of storage, and an NVIDIA GTX 980M graphics card. With all of that hardware, the Surface Studio was one of the fastest machines I've ever used. I was able to juggle dozens of browser tabs, 4K video playback, and Minecraft running with high-quality settings all at once without breaking a sweat. That speed was buoyed by the new wireless Surface keyboard, which simply feels great to type on, and the comfortable new wireless mouse. Since it's limited to notebook graphics cards though, the Studio doesn't perform as well in high-end games as larger desktops. In 3D Mark, it scored around 20% lower than the $200 Radeon RX 480 GPU, and it was able to run games like Gears of War 4 decently in 1080p. It's a shame Microsoft couldn't include Nvidia's newer 10 series mobile GPUs in the Studio, but the company says those weren't ready in time for development. When it comes to VR, Microsoft says it can handle light experiences. Since none of the video card options are technically VR ready, I wouldn't count on it running something like Eve Valkyrie very well. Microsoft also developed a new accessory for the Studio, the $100 Surface Dial. It's a small puck that resembles an AV receiver volume dial, which you can use to control various contextual options. You could, for example, have it change the color hues in Sketchable, or rotate and zoom into an image as you're working on it. What's really interesting is how you use the dial. It can sit on your desk or be placed right on the Studio screen, with its contextual options right alongside it. There's a bit of a learning curve, but the dial's potential as a new method of computer interaction seems far beyond something like Apple's new MacBook Pro Touch Bar. It's also very much a first-gen product. I noticed that it starts to slip a bit if you leave it on the screen, since it's relying on sticky material to stay attached. It's basically always meant to have your hand holding it. Clicking through the various settings can be a pain, and it's sometimes hard to see what options are actually available. More so than a typical desktop, the Surface Studio is being positioned as the ideal computer for creatives. It's particularly tempting for digital artists who rely on styluses. The Surface Pen worked just as well as it did on the Surface Pro 4 and Book, and I found it to be even more engrossing since you can really lean into a much larger workspace. When we had an artist test it out, they adapted pretty quickly to the pen and the Studio's angled orientation, and they particularly enjoyed the resistance of the pen on the screen. The dial took a bit more getting used to, and when compared to the iPad Pro, they noted the palm rejection seemed worse on the Studio. Both of those issues disrupted his creative flow at times. The computer also had trouble recognizing when he wanted to move an image around, which often led to unwanted brushstrokes from his fingers. Hopefully, software updates will smooth out those issues. Competition-wise, the $3,000 Studio is almost twice as much as Apple's 27-inch 5K iMac, and you won't get stylus support there. It'd be interesting to see if Microsoft can deliver a more affordable Studio down the line with a smaller screen. Overall, the Surface Studio continues Microsoft's focus on making people more productive. It's one of the best all-in-ones I've ever used, but its high price and lack of upgradability could make it a tough sell for an already niche market, especially for people who are already devoted to their Wacom tablets.